Hi everyone, Kartik Krishnaiyer here from the Pavilion on Beyond the Boundary. Now, 2 weeks ago, I released a video, it wasn't a podcast, for the From the Pavilion YouTube page, which now people are discovering and asking me to expand upon, given the context, which was initially I recorded a quick video after Ben Stokes had gone out on his bender, or whatever you want to call it, after the first test match. The first test was completed at Lord's, which England defeated New Zealand. And I had just, very ironically enough, come off covering England and New Zealand playing a football match, which I was in person for. I think most of you know I was covering England for 2 weeks, England football for 2 weeks in the lead up to the World Cup. Their training camp prior to the start of the World Cup. They're now at their base camp in Kansas City. Actually, they're going to be playing Ghana today, later today, UK time, in their second group match. And some of the things that were coming to my mind are the difference in kind of the cultures around England football and England cricket in the wake of the Stokes thing. Now, since then, we have had a situation where England were destroyed in the second test, which was at the Oval, and we saw just an absolute masterclass from New Zealand. Matt Henry's masterclass. I think Ravindra, who had been horrible in the first test, had a good season in the IPL and a very good T20 World Cup as New Zealand made the final, lost to India in the World Cup final. Ravindra has really struck back and had a great, I think a great second test at the Oval, and England were a mess. Absolute mess. There were some decent performances, Emilio Gay, obviously, and Joe Root, Harry Brook, who has been inconsistent this year, really, this calendar year, going back to the Ashes, has been inconsistent, was okay. But Matt Henry was brilliant, as he often is for New Zealand. And I felt like there was a complete disruption in the England team because Ben Stokes, and also very importantly, Gus Atkinson were dropped. And that was because of their curfew breach, and maybe I called it a bender, maybe it was whatever it was, okay? It was a curfew breach. But it wasn't good. It wasn't good behavior from a captain, and there's a cultural problem around England cricket. And I've even seen some of the football writers that I respect the most in the UK weigh in on this. I mean, it was pretty funny because football is everything. The World Cup is everything to England, except it seemed like when this happened, even in the lead up to Thomas Tuchel walking into the press conference in Orlando after the warm-up match against Costa Rica, I was chatting with a couple of English journalists about, is Ben Stokes going to be dropped? Right? I mean, that's really kind of like, that was on everyone's mind. England looks structurally compromised without them. And obviously, we talk about Henry's masterpiece. So now we're going to have the third test in New Zealand's tour at Trent Bridge in Nottingham coming up. And the ECB have announced that Ben Stokes and Gus Atkinson have been withdrawn from county cricket for the next few fixtures. So there's a clear message out there. The disciplinary thing is over. We're more concerned about results, and Brendan McCullum has questions to answer. There was a lot of anger that he was retained as England manager after the Ashes disaster and then the T20 World Cup, where England underperformed, but they kept getting results, right? This is the thing, just like the Euro 24 in football, since we were talking about football a little earlier. When Gareth Southgate, they clearly underperformed, right? They drew with Slovenia. They draw with Denmark also, or someone else in the group stage, right? They should not have beaten Slovakia in the knockout stage. Switzerland were the better team against them in the knockout stage, and they won on pens. They got to the finals, and lo and behold, Yamal isn't so brilliant, they win the final. So the T20 World Cup was similar. England started off with a very lucky victory over Nepal, of all nations, right? I mean, We talked about how the U.S. potentially beating India in that first fixture would have been the shot heard around the world, a great upset. But actually, Nepal beating England might have been a bigger upset. And then they struggled against Scotland at times. They really struggled against Italy, who were making their World Cup debut and have a bunch of English kind of expats in their team. And then, really, I thought we're fortunate against Pakistan in the Super 8s. They did beat New Zealand in the Super 8s. And then against India, they almost chased it down, but it was like they didn't look right the whole tournament. They really didn't. And they got to the semifinal, lost to India. So the criticism of Bazball and Brendan McCullum is, well, they can't beat Australia and they can't beat India, but the high risk, high reward pays off against everyone else. Well, now it's not paid off against McCullum's own country that he was star for in New Zealand. Not having Stokes and Atkinson took a lot away from them. Jofra Archer was really off after having a really good IPL season, but Archer is always hit or miss, and we see this at the T20 level and at test level with the feast or famine approach of basketball, and one day level. You see it. So New Zealand has proven that they're more disciplined, I think, and their traditional brand of cricket can completely dismantle a discombobulated England side. So now there's a reversal going on. And I want to, for those of you who have not seen it, and we're going to re-release it on from the Pavilion, and you're going to see it maybe for the first time on the Beyond the Boundary and Beyond the 90 components of this. And I know this setup is clunky. Beyond the 90 was started as a soccer for Americans who get really sensitive about the use of the term football, football/soccer site. And I'm American, but I've called it football for my entire adult life because that's my orientation. I don't condemn anyone for calling it soccer, but I call it football as well. So I know this is clunky. This goes out on multiple channels, but we're getting viewership and listenership everywhere, so we're just going to keep it going. But for those of you who did not check out From the Pavilion website, or From the Pavilion YouTube page, immediately following this, you will see my initial report, my initial video from 2 weeks ago about the crisis of England cricket and the entitlement and the kind of even asking the class question about the class of England cricketers all being kind of upper class, most of them being upper class. Does that give them sort of a behavioral, a different sort of behavior than we see in other sports where the athletes tend to be working class? Because there is something very wrong culturally with England cricket the last year, and I'm far from the only person talking about it. As I said, football journalists, people who don't normally cover cricket, have been talking about it. And I even saw Mark Ogden talk about it on Sky one day, and I had not seen him talk about any other sport, actually, quite frankly. He's an expert on the northern clubs, in particular, reporting on Man City and Man United. So, so stay tuned. If you have not seen that, it immediately follows this. Thank you. Hi, everyone from the Pavilion. I'm Carter Krishnaiyer. Now, this week, I've had the great privilege of covering England football in the flesh as they prepare for the FIFA World Cup here in the United States. I am an accredited, credentialed journalist covering England football, so have had a friendly match in Tampa the other day, another friendly match in Orlando tomorrow, training sessions in between. So I should be focused on that, as well as we should be talking about England's performance in the first test match at Lord's against New Zealand. And it was a good performance in spite of the clunkiness of the Lord's pitch. I wanted to talk a little more, as I did on the Beyond the Boundary newsletter, about how bowling was outstanding in that first test by both New Zealand and England, quite frankly. And after months of seeing Big Bash T20 batting between the ICC T20 World Cup and the recently completed Indian Premier League season, we finally saw bowlers roar back. So that should be what we're talking about in terms of cricket. But we're not. We're talking about the culture, the booze culture around England cricket. And quite frankly, as someone who also covers England in football, as I said, been around the squad this week, they don't have these problems on the football side. They did once upon a time. Everyone remembers Paul Gascoigne and others, but they don't have this problem. This is a problem specific to England cricket. And let's go through the last 6 months, because really the last 6 months have been disastrous. We had the airport altercations, including Ben Stokes, who is the captain as of this recording. What happens in the next 24, 48, 72 hours? What happens before the next match in New Zealand's tour, the next test in New Zealand's tour of England? I'm not sure. The sources are reporting he's going to step down as captain. He may even retire from international cricket. We'll see. But so we had that clash with a cameraman. We had Harry Brooks booze his booze culture crisis, if we want to call it, with during the white ball tour of Sri Lanka, and what happened there, and that he had effectively been dishonest about it. We had Ben Duckett's admission of his unprofessional behavior during the Ashes. That came a couple months later. That came, I think, as right after the T20 World Cup. And let's not forget, England got to the semifinal of the T20 World Cup in spite of all of this, right? They struggled against Italy. They struggled against Nepal. They never should have beaten Nepal. That could have been a historic upset. But they got through that match somehow. They got through the Italy match despite playing poorly. They quite frankly, gave India more than we thought they would. India batted first and posted a great number, and England almost chased that down. So they actually performed, in spite of the unevenness of their performances, and as I mentioned, particularly the Nepal match and the Italy match, they were able to really kind of take care of business when it came to playing the likes of New Zealand and Pakistan, other top sides, until they ran into India, and everybody has problems with India. So they actually had a pretty good tournament after a disastrous performance in the Ashes. And then I think this was a great victory at Lord's against the New Zealand side that boasts some of the best bowling in the world. And so we should be talking about that. But now we're talking about a nightclub incident involving the captain, Ben Stokes. The night after the fourth day of that test, and as I was actually covering England in football, thinking the cricket is over and we'll worry about cricket in a couple of weeks when the next test between England and New Zealand happens. This comes right after the curfew that Ben Stokes himself championed was imposed on England cricketers. And so Stokes became one of the first cricketers to violate his own curfew. Now, off-pitch incidents are always very interesting for the back pages, for tabloids, for gossip. But I'm telling you why I think this is a crisis. And I approach this as someone who comes from a football world, right? A world around, or soccer as we call it in the United States, but a football world, where cricket is a sport, particularly outside T20, diminishing in its appeal to younger people. The T20 game, particularly the IPL, has a massive following worldwide. There are people who I know that watch the Indian Premier League who do not watch international cricket, who don't care about international cricket. There are people in the UK I know that watch the Indian game, the Indian T20 game specifically, but do not watch Test cricket, do not watch international cricket, only passively follow even the T20 international competitions. So the IPL has captured an audience, much like the Premier League has in football, an audience of people who don't necessarily follow the sport otherwise. So that's something to note. I think there is a crisis of interest in England cricket when you have what appears to be an entitled culture around the England side. And you have what are players of a certain profile and a certain social status and a certain socioeconomic, that's the term we use here in the United States, socioeconomic background, acting out, behaving the way they are. I think there is a real prospect that outside of sports journalists who tend to probably give cricket more coverage than it deserves based on how many people are interested in it in Britain at the current moment. Truthfully, it's the same thing as baseball in the United States. Baseball has far more media interest in the United States than it has actual fandom, proportionally, because journalists tend to be older. The younger audience in the United States is not interested in baseball. With it's down the list of sports they're interested in. Similarly, in Britain, I think cricket is down the list of sports that the younger British public is interested in, with the exception, as I said, of the T20 game, and particularly the Indian Premier League, which seems to have created an international fandom based around how it's marketed, much like the Premier League has in football, the English Premier League, if you want to call it that to distinguish it. So cricketers behaving badly, I think, is a real potential mortal threat to England fandom and keeping younger fans interested in England cricket at the county cricket level, at the 100 level, right? Obviously, the 100 is a relatively new competition domestically in England, county cricket board level, and then when we talk about one day and test cricket, I think this is something the ECB is going to have to handle. They're going to probably have to handle it aggressively. And it's a shame because England continues to perform fairly well on the pitch. But this is not a culture that is going over real big. And you have the opportunity. You can watch football 24/7 now because of streaming if you're in the UK. So you don't have to watch cricket at all. Quite frankly, you don't have to watch rugby at all. You don't have to watch Americanized sports at all, or golf or tennis, or snooker, any of that stuff, darts. There's so much soccer/football out there that cricket has to keep its foothold in the UK sports market. And I feel like things like this begin to threaten it. And the commentary I hear from people is, oh, well, that's cricketers, right? It's that kind of sport. It's an elitist sport. These are guys who feel very entitled. These are guys who come from a certain background and feel like the consequences and accountability doesn't apply to them. So I think it is a very serious situation that England faces, and let's see what the ECB does about this.